Quarterbacks, defensive line, or something else. Previewing the New York Giants' biggest training camp storylines. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you're making us your first listen of the day, we thank you for that as well. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, Giant fans, we are here. We made it. It is training camp week. The Giants report to camp on Tuesday. First practice is Wednesday. So we're just basically a few hours away. And, for today's show, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some of the top storylines previewing Giants training camp. The rookies have been in for the last several days. Really not a whole lot to report there because it's been mostly meetings, walkthroughs, and that sort of thing. But the fun will really get started this week. And what's going to be the biggest storyline? I mean, you can take your pick, really. Is it going to be the quarterbacks, the defensive line? Is it going to be something else? Well, I'm going to go through what I think are some of the storylines that we're going to keep an eye on, tell you why they're a storyline, tell you what I think is going to play out, and just, take it through as we count down the hours now. We are on hours until we get to Giants training camp. So again, welcome on in. Let's get into it. All right. We're going to start off with the big question. And the big question is there a chance that at quarterback, Russell Wilson will not be the starter come week one? Now, there's been an increase of people saying that it should be Jaxson Dart. There should be a legitimate, competition between the quarterbacks. Folks, if Russell Wilson is not the starting quarterback in week one, that's because he got injured, okay, and he can't play. Russell Wilson is going to be the starting quarterback week one if he is healthy. So there is no true quarterback competition as maybe we might know it to be, all right? Now, is there a quarterback competition for number two? I'll get to that in just a minute, but let me tell you why there is no quarterback competition on the Giants, and nor should there be a quarterback competition at this juncture. Dart is a rookie, all right? A very talented rookie who's going to be really, really good one day. But right now, the Giants have Russell Wilson, a 10-time Super Bowl winning quarterback. Dart hasn't played a down in the NFL. All right. So to say that this would be a fair competition for Jaxson Dart to maybe overtake Russell Wilson, it's not. It just isn't. And remember, people will say, well, Jaden Daniels came in as rookie and he was fine. And, other quarterbacks have done it. Well, little different circumstance. Okay. Number one, this Giants regime, Brian Daboll, Joe Shane, they are in year 4. They are just not starting out to where they can say, okay, you know what? Let's just throw Jaxson Dart in there. Let's just have him start, take his slumps, because we're not in danger of losing our jobs if we don't do well this year, right? If they were in year 1, yes, then maybe you can make the argument that there would be a little bit more of a competition. But no, they have to win games this year. And Russell Wilson gives them the best chance to win games, whether we want to admit to it or not. Now, the other reason why I say Jaxson Dart is probably just not going to be fully in the picture this year, the Giants double insulated at quarterback. And by that, I mean they brought in Jameis Winston to be quarterback too. Now, if you go back to when Daboll and Shane were up in Buffalo, they had to start Josh Allen, I think, a little before that they felt he would be ready. And he had to take his lumps because they didn't really have a solid backup behind, they didn't have that double insulation, if you will. All right. So this time around, they made sure, they said, okay, we got Wilson, who's won a Super Bowl, who's been to multiple Pro Bowls. We got Jameis Winston, who can win games. This should ensure that Dart doesn't need to get out on the field as a starter until he is absolutely positively ready to go. Okay, so, regardless of how you feel about Jameis Winston, and I know there are people out there who say he's, kind of a wild card in terms of, you never know what you're going to get with him. That was the thinking with the quarterback situation. Now, there's absolutely no sin if Dart sits this entire year. Some people are going to say, well, how is he going to get the experience he needs? What are they going to do? They're just going to start all over again. And you can make the same argument next year that if he sits the entire year, he will not have played an entire down in the NFL. The difference being is he's going to go through an extensive prep period, if you will, in which he's going to have all kinds of things thrown at him. He's going to learn. They're going to work on his mechanics. They're going to get him totally up to snuff so that when the time comes, he's going to be ready. All right. I realize every young player has to start somewhere, but before you start him someplace, you want to make sure that he is ready to go in there, regardless of the position he plays. So with Jaxson Dart, what I do think is going to happen at some point, and probably not until we get later on in the season, could I see Jaxson Dart passing Jameis Winston at quarterback 2? Absolutely. I've said that before. Look, if you want to get Jaxson Dart some snaps and you have a healthy Russell Wilson, the way to get Jaxson Dart snaps is to promote him to QB2. Because if he stays at QB3, that means he'll probably be the emergency quarterback and he won't be able to go into a game unless the two quarterbacks in front of him can't play. So to me, the competition, if there is the competition at quarterback, is at some point is Jaxson Dart going to show the coaching staff that, hey, I'm a little bit further along than maybe anybody thought, and maybe we expedite this to where I become quarterback 2. Kind of like what would happen with Eli Manning. Eli Manning, when he was acquired via trade, he was quarterback 2 behind Kurt Warner. And then, as Eli progressed and got ready and showed the coaching staff that he could handle being the starter, that's when they flipped the switch. So that's what I could potentially see happening with the quarterback situation today as it stands with the Giants. And, the regime, like I said, they're not in a position to where they can just put Jaxson Dart out there. If it was a different circumstance, then I would say absolutely yes. But look, there's no harm, again, in Jaxson Dart sitting for several weeks, just so long as he continues to progress. And the Giants, they have a very detailed plan. They've talked about it before. And as I've said before, you don't want to throw him out there before he's ready because, that's basically what they did with Daniel Jones. And part of the reason why I believe Daniel Jones didn't work out for the team, they didn't do him any favors. So you let Jaxson Dart develop, given what you invested in him, and you see what you got with Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson, if he has them 2-6 by the week 8 of the season, then maybe you give some thought to making a switch at that point. But right now, anybody who's saying that the Giants should definitely put Jaxson Dart out there or that there's a competition, there really isn't per se. I mean, not even the second quarterback spot is a true competition. But if anything, I would say if everybody stays healthy, the quarterback picture is going to pretty much roll out. Wilson as number 1, Winston as number 2, Dart is number 3, and then Tommy DeVito, I doubt they get him on the practice squad. I doubt he even wants to stay on the practice squad. So, the quarterback position, I think everybody who's making roster forecasts will probably get it right, assuming there are no injuries. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball and one of the most interesting position battles that are going to be going on this summer, and that is the defensive line. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, Giant fans, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. This is an ad by BetterHelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday. Of course, most of us just can't quit our jobs or take endless vacations, but we can start small, whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into your day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges. That's where BetterHelp comes in. The flexibility of online therapy makes it easy to fit sessions into a busy schedule, no matter where you are. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can help provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. This week, I've got Judy Batista scheduled to come on the show. Judy Batista, of course, with the NFL Network. Ed Valentine and I, at some point, are going to connect for a show previewing training camp, just talking about what's coming up. And then, of course, once we get into training camp, I'm going to have for you reports. So if there's a practice, there will be a report. And for the coming week, practices are for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Nothing on Saturday, and then we're right back at it. On Sunday, so you get some weekend shows. Whether they're full shows or short shows, we'll keep you up to date on everything going on at Giants training camp. And don't forget to also check out the YouTube channel where we'll have short videos and just quick recaps until we can get a full show out to you. So that's what's coming up here on Locked On Giants. We're getting back to our preview, and that is, what are some of the bigger competitions and storylines that we're going to be paying attention to this summer? And, defensive line is really one that intrigues me a lot because, look, last year the Giants tried to roll more with youth on the defensive line, and it really didn't pan out a little bit. And you heard me say quite often on this show, if you're an everydayer, you heard me say that Dexter Lawrence, who I think is, all world, he's probably the best defensive lineman in the league, but he can't do it all by himself. And when you look at the run game problems that the Giants had last year, a lot of it started up front with that defensive line. So, for example, you had guys that weren't occupying blockers. And so you saw a lot of the opposing offensive linemen get to the second level where they were able to kind of stonewall the Giant linebackers. And it just had a ripple down effect for the Giants run defense. And that's why, in part, the run defense wasn't very good. So the goal of the Giants this year, obviously, they added a lot of defensive line help. They want guys in there who are not only versatile, guys who can play the run, but also maybe help collapse the pocket, get a little pressure on the quarterback. But they also want to be able to specifically help that run defense, which just was not very good last year. All right. So that being said, the incumbents, besides Dexter Lawrence, is Raheem Nunez-Roches. Now, I like Nacho. Nacho, I think, for the most part, showed a little bit more last year, but he wasn't exactly occupying blocks. He wasn't exactly, drawing double teams at an alarming rate like you would expect, a guy up front. And, somebody, I put this point out and somebody said, well, Nacho had a pretty good year last year, but let me give you some breakdowns on his stats here. Nacho ranked 31st, according to Pro Football Focus, out of 40 run defenders. Now, according to NFL stats, he had 52 tackles, okay, which was the most by a Giants defensive lineman, but he only had 14 solo tackles. Now, Dexter Lawrence, by contrast, had 44 in 12 games. All right. So, you know what? I think the Giants probably need a little bit more next to Dexter Lawrence's or from Dexter Lawrence's running mate. Now, you probably say, well, what about the linebackers? What was their role in the run defense falling down? So again, per NFL stats, Micah McFadden last year had 107 tackles to lead the team, 60 solo, only 33 against the run, or 30.8% of his tackles came against the run. Bobby Okereke, 93 tackles. I think he was third on the team overall. 47 solo tackles, 31 against the run for 33.3%. Okay, not so great. Both of those numbers, by the way, Okereke's and McFadden, down from the year before. So I pulled those numbers as well. Bobby Okereke had in 2023 64 out of 149 tackles were against the run, 42.9%, and Micah McFadden, of his 97 tackles the year prior, 41 of those were against the run, 42.2%. So you want to keep those linebackers cleaner so that they can make the tackles, and they're not getting picked off by offensive linemen at the second level, because that's really not a good matchup. So it all starts up front with that defensive line. And the Giants, as you all know by now, they really brought in a lot of talent to help that defensive front, because again, Dexter can't do it all by his lonesome. He's good, but he's not that good. And I think he'll be the first to tell you that. So I feel optimistic that the run defense is going to be a little bit better, but that competition, is it going to be Roy Robertson Harris? Is he going to be one of the defensive linemen? Are the Giants going to stick with the two down linemen, which I think they will? I think that's what they started with last year, and then they moved off of that once Dexter got hurt. So, we'll see how that plays out. Once the pads go on, we'll be able to really tell if the defensive line, how the talent really looks. But the Giants definitely need more from that group that they just weren't getting last year. And look, if they can get some pass rush out of it, even better. And I think the guys that Joe Schoen brought in can give them some pass rush to help them really, pick things up a little bit. So, all right, coming up next, some more storylines, concerns, and whatnot. That's going to be right after this.
This episode is brought to you by Rugiet. I know that you've probably heard of Viagra and Cialis, maybe even tried them, but if you're looking for something that goes beyond the usual pill, then it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Their 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, kicks in fast, on average in about 15 minutes, while some of those usual pills can take up to hours, and the effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can always stay confident in control when the moment is right. And it's all completely online. You can read real customer reviews on their website, and over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Just head over to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information.
All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We are here. We made it. Training camp this week. Lots going to happen, lots to cover. On Wednesday, Joe Schoen is going to speak to the media, along with Brian Daboll, the opening annual opening State of the Giants presser. We'll find out who starts the year on PUP, which guys are injured. We'll start to get some clarity on that. And then, of course, they're going to build up until to the padded practices. And I think the first padded practice, I want to say, is the 28th. So it's going to be here before we realize it. And it's going to be a lot to cover. All right, speaking of injuries and stuff, that's probably going to be a big storyline as well. Who of the Giants who maybe were limited or didn't practice at all during the spring, who's going to be ready and who's not? All eyes, number one, will be on Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas was held out of the spring practices. Now, the hope is obviously he'll be ready to go, but will they put him out there right away and let him build up, or will they hold him out a little bit longer, try to buy as much time as possible? I would like to see Andrew Thomas out there. If he's healthy, 100%, no need to dial him back, even if you make the argument, oh, they know what they've got in him. One of the problems the Giants had last year is that their offensive line, their starting five offensive line, really didn't play together all that much, didn't practice together all that much last summer. And it took a little while for them to get, acclimated to one another. I think the first game against the Vikings, they had, I want to say 5 sacks, and I think it was something like 8 or 9 quarterback hits. So you want that offensive line to play together because it has been a while since they have worked together as a whole. Okay, so Andrew Thomas probably going to be the number one injury that everybody's going to be looking for. Right behind him, I think, is going to be Bobby Okereke. Now, Okereke, he practiced earlier in the spring, and then they backed off of him. They didn't say why. And it's interesting because Bobby, when he spoke to us after an early OTA, he said, oh, I'm feeling great. It's behind me. And then they backed off of him. So did he develop something else? Why did they back off of him? And is he going to be okay? All right. Bobby Okereke, I know he had a bad season last year, or basically not the type of season that he had the year prior. So it's a comeback year for him. And hopefully he'll be able to get out there and not have any issues. And whenever they back off of a player late in the spring, that's usually going to get my attention because, we saw it last year with Evan Neal, despite the fact that they denied that he had a setback, and we found out that he did. So let's hope that Bobby O did not have any setbacks and he is good to go. Okay, we have a pair of rookies that we need to find out about. And as far as their health goes, Darius Alexander, who didn't practice at all this spring, and Cam Scatterbu, who again started in the, earlier in the spring, and then they backed off of him. So both of those guys especially need to be out there. You can't have those guys start the year on PUP because they're already falling behind in terms of, learning the finer points of their technique and the intricacies that they're going to need to know at this level. Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver, is another guy who, is he okay? Jalen Hyatt got hurt on the very first day of the mandatory minicamp, and we didn't see him the rest of the way. So it was a left leg injury. What it was, I couldn't tell you if it was a groin or a hammy. Let's hope it's neither. All right. So we'll see how that, plays out if he's able to get out there because, look, he had a solid spring. But, with Jalen Hyatt, we said the same thing about him the year prior, and look at what happened. I'd like to see him take that next step. And he's not going to be able to do that if, heaven forbid, he has to sit on the sideline because he's nursing an injury. And then really the only other guy off the top of my head that comes to mind, Malik Neighbors with the toe. I think he had turf toe at some point last season. So is he going to be okay? He should, you would think. I guess put him in the category of we know what we've got with him, so he should be fine. And then I also wrote down Chris Manhertz, the blocking tight end, who's probably one of the most underrated guys on that offense. So we'll see how he does. Now, playing off of the injury angle, that's probably my biggest concern with this team. And not because this team always seems to get hurt, but the flow of the injuries kind of has affected how Brian Daboll has prepped this team in the summertime. So in other words, if there's a lot of injuries and guys can't go, Daboll tends to back off a little bit. And we kind of also saw some of that in the preseason where he just backed off of guys. The thinking being, oh, let's just get them ready and have them ready for week 1. Well, that being said, while I understand the logic behind it, the Giants have 2 games right out of the chute against NFC East opponents, all right? Washington and Dallas, both on the road. They cannot afford to go 0-2 in those first 2 games. Would a 1-1 split be okay? I would take that. I would prefer a 2-0 start. But if they drop those 2 games, That's going to set the tone for the season. So I mention that because Brian Daboll in the past, the last couple of years at any rate, he hasn't given his starters a lot of work in the preseason games. And I realize we're a few weeks away before we get to the preseason games, but I want to see those starters getting more work. I don't want to see them having to sit down because they're banged up or, oh, we know what we've got, or we don't want to run the risk of this guy getting injured. No, you've got to get these guys ready. All right. So, I would like to think that Brian Daboll is going to adjust how he operates. Now, in the past, what he's done is if they have joint practices, he usually backs off of them in the game. So this year, the Giants have joint practices against one team, that being the Jets, week 2. So is it possible we see some of the starters play in week 1 and week 3? I sure hope so. I don't want to see a case where, we're going to sit the starters in week 2 and then we're going to sit them in week 3. And now you're talking literally over a month or almost a month in between live reps in a game. And that's why I believe that this team has just not looked ready coming out of the chute. So the injuries will play a part of that. And I realize, you don't want to push a guy if he's banged up, but if he's not going to have it any worse, if he goes out there and works, or if it's something that he can work through, then why not let him? So I'm curious to see how that plays out for the Giants as well, because look, I don't have to tell you guys, injuries have always been a problem with this team, and the Bucks got to stop somewhere. So, I realize it's a tough balance, but like I said, with the schedule of opponents coming up and the order in which they were given to the Giants, they cannot afford to come out of the chute and look like they're still in training camp. And that to me is probably one of, if not the biggest concerns as we get ready for training camp. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Now, before we say goodbye, the Locked On NFL Top 100 is finally here. It was voted on by the NFL hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Our top 100 was formed by the experts who cover the teams and the players every day. You can find the full list of Locked On Sports today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, we'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode. Don't forget, this week, the plan is to have Judy Batista of NFL Network to help preview some of the stuff with the Giants. Ed Valentine, hopefully we can connect with him to have him on, and then we're going to get right into our daily training camp report. So hope you will tune in for all that. And as always, I thank you for listening, spending part of your day with us here. And if you made us your first listen of the day, thank you again. I will see you tomorrow.